All right. Ladies and gentlemen, let's focus the attention back on the court to our next presentation. Thank you so much.
All right, guys, that was an exciting presentation by Samir, working with the visually impaired. We're going to move on to the next segment. We have a panel discussion, the topic of Dennis's teaching fundamentals, such as the standard method, the 13 steps of serving, group teaching, having a sense of humor, and how that has remained relevant in today's practices, and also how it has evolved over the years. I'm going to introduce 5 panelists. You guys can approach the court as I announce you, and feel free to give them a round of applause as well. Starting off with Habtu Belayneh. He's a 35-year PTR member. He's coached and certified over 500 Ethiopian tennis professionals. He's received the PTR Humanitarian Award in 2018. Habtu is currently the director of tennis programs at Tivoli Lakes in Florida. Habtu? Our next panelist is Ernie Qaurles. He's the recipient of the 2011 PTR Volunteer of the Year Award, and he's been a PTR member for 36 years. He has also been honored as the Maryland Pro of the Year in 2005 and 2017. Throughout his career, Ernie has dedicated himself to fostering a love for tennis for the African American community. In addition to his work in tennis, he's also an attorney and currently serves as a faculty member at Johns, with the S, Johns Hopkins University. Our next panelist is Tina Tharp. She is a PTR International Master Professional and has served as the chair of the International Master Professional Selection Committee. She received the USTA Middle States College Coach of the Year Award in 2015. And Tina is currently in her 18th season as the men's and women's tennis coach at Westchester University. Our next panelist is Eddie Parker, a Vandermeer alumnus who also co-authored the book, The Complete Book of Tennis Strategy, with Dennis in 1987. He served as the chairman of the Mid-Atlantic Coaches Commission for 10 years and was inducted into the Richmond Tennis Hall of Fame in 2019. And last but not least, our last panelist is Mark Blouin. He became a PTR International Master Professional in 2014. He was a USTA High Performance Coach, Etchberry certified, and holds an MBA. Mark has been a director of tennis at Augusta Country Club since 2012. I'm also introducing our distinguished moderators as well. Our first moderator is Kyle LaCroix. He's the founder of Specialized Educational Tennis Solutions, also known as SETS. Is recognized as a master professional by the RSPA. He has received more than 8 awards, including the 2018 Florida Under 30 Professional of the Year Award. He empowers young racket professionals by providing guidance to help them succeed in their own careers. And if he isn't already, he should be on everyone's contact list because he always makes time for you. And our last moderator is Kameron Dehart. He's an aspiring marketing consultant and tennis professional. He possesses exceptional people skills for interacting with both adults and juniors. He understands the significance of carrying on the Dehart legacy and is also committed to doing the same for the Vandermeer legacy. Cameron.
Thank you. Well, welcome PTR 50th anniversary. Obviously, we're here for the idea and the passion of one man, Dennis Vandermeer. Dennis Vandermeer did a lot more than just teach and shape strokes. He also taught and shaped people. And that's really why we had this amazing collection of panelists today with us. So I want to start with something super personal, starting with Tina, because my mom raised a gentleman, ladies first. What, if you can remember, what was your first interaction with Dennis, and how has that vividly impacted you today?
Well, when you showed me the question up there, he said, take time to think about it. And I was like, I don't have to take time. I know exactly. If you were here earlier, you heard that I was invited to do a clinic at the Plantations Resort in Lewis, Delaware. And I was out on the court, and I went to explain something, and I leaned my tennis racket up against the net, and I went out like I was Italian and started using my hands to demonstrate. And then I walked over to the side, and very quietly, Dennis walked over to me, didn't pick up my racket and throw it, but he looked at me and he asked me, "Where's your racket?" And I said, "Well, it's right there." And he goes, "You're a teaching professional. It should always be in your hand because it's an extension of who you are." And that racket has never left my hand.
Same question? Yeah. For me, I met Dennis at Grey Rocks in north of Montreal, Canada, where Butch was the head tennis professional there. And it was really cool because for me, it changed my life, of course, and the interaction. We had a large group of people then at the time doing the TU, and of course, there were mentors of mine, Eddie Parker and Yap De Boer were there, and it was just amazing to meet Dennis and Pat there and go to the experience and understanding that standard method, why it makes sense and why it's more as Tina mentioned, you present yourself in a much, much more professional light, not just holding the racket, but by having a structure. So that was really what stood out to me was the structure. And then the fun part at the end of the day was playing tennis with Dennis and Yob and seeing Eddie, of course, fast Eddie running down everything, and it's amazing. So it was a game changer for me at that time.
All right, well, when I was in my junior year of college, I went to Sweetbriar to get certified. And my senior year, I graduated. While I was at Sweetbriar, Dennis wanted me to play 21 every day at lunchtime in the heat. And I was always late to get lunch and always had to. But anyway, enjoyed having working and playing with him. But then when I was graduating from college, he called me up on our telephone and at our dorm and asked me when I was going to graduate, and I said May 7th. And he said, "I'll see you down in Hilton Head on May 8th. And I said, "Dennis, I need like a week or two." And he goes, No, you'll be there on May 8th. And then he hung up the phone. And then since then, he pretty much took me under his wing and taught me almost everything I know about the game of tennis and how to teach and so on and so forth. So, yeah, that was it.
Gosh. Well, actually, my first TU that I ever attended down here, I was invited to come down. Alan Dupree from Maryland, who's recently left us, was the person who encouraged me to come down to learn how to teach. I had just started I'd been around tennis for a long time, but I didn't start playing until after I was actually out of college. But I'd been around the game for at least a decade, watching friends play in high school, on the pro tour, the whole bit. So I came down for the TU and found out when I arrived that somehow the registration didn't go through. And back in those days, everything in terms of how it was organized was dependent on the number of people who were attending. And so I just remember, I was like, what do you mean? I drove all the way down from Maryland and I'm not registered? Kind of a thing. And I remember Gavin went to Pat and then went to Dennis, and we had a conversation, and I was allowed to stay and take the TU. And during the TU, there's a thing where Dennis observes everybody doing their service motion, and then you go into the big room, and he faces everybody, and then they just tell him who's up next. And you raise your hand, he doesn't look at the monitor, and then he begins to reveal what your problems were, your challenges were. And so we're in the midst of that, and someone comes walking into the room, walks straight up the aisle in the middle while Dennis is talking, and they say, are you Dennis Vandermeer? And Dennis says, yes, I am. And this person serves Dennis, okay? And I don't know if you remember that, right? And so Dennis obviously gets served, and Dennis knew that I was an attorney, so immediately after the session, Dennis grabbed me and said, do you have any plans for lunch? And so we go to lunch, and I explain the methods of how you can be served to Dennis. And that was the beginning, literally, of our relationship. It was always a very close bond. I mean, Dennis was like a father to me, and I'll explain more later on.
Love it. You know, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And Dennis definitely learned about you very quickly. So thank you for that.
Good afternoon. My name is Habtu, and I knew Dennis before I met him in person. And I used to get that video, educational video, watch him. I love the sense of humor. I love the teaching methodology he used. And we are very fortunate to have two of our best junior players. Here is the Belayneh and Masai. They just joined Vandermeer Tennis Academy, and our relationship is becoming much better and stronger. And thanks to Dan Santorum is here. And then the first time he came to Africa, to Nairobi, to do the PTR certification course, I was lucky to attend. And then the same year, I came to attend the PTR certification, conference, symposium. And then ever since, and Dennis and Pat was very, very special for me and for lots of underprivileged countries, coaches. And not only we attend the symposium, and then we're free coaching registration for Tennis University 1, 2, and really that changed my prospect, the way I think tennis coaching should be. And I really thank him. And then ever since, I'm so happy every day and very lucky and fortunate. After I moved to Iraq from, I used to work for ITF in Africa, in South Africa. And then after I resigned from ITF, and then straight I came to work for Vandermeer. And of course, I met Gavin, everybody, all the staffs. And then it's really changed my life. And then stay in the business, in the coaching business forever. And then I am very, very grateful. Thank you.
So one of Dennis's big things was teaching group sessions and the importance of that. What is a way that he made it so effective, and how did you use it in your coaching?
Well, I just followed Dennis's lead of having the humor and making sure people were always moving. I didn't like people standing still. If I walk by a court nowadays, or I stop by a tennis facility and I watch, and I'm like, why are these people standing in line? They must be so bored. They need Dennis back. And so it's constantly moving and constantly having them have fun, and that they have laughter, that they want to come back to the court again and again.
Yeah, to Tina's point, I think the same for me. I'm using that, the road steps, if it's the serve, forehand, backhand, volley. Organizing the group, I think, is very key, to get people moving. And I still remember Dennis saying, quick, quickly, but he was right. I mean, if you get people moving and focusing on one thing, and there's action, activity going on, it makes the session, of course, it goes quicker, but they learn more. They really want to come back. So that was really pretty cool to me to see how that would work versus long discussions over and over and over again. And I know for me, I would learn a lot, of course, from watching Gavin, Eddie, Rick Meek, people like that, Louis Cap, of course, running amazing clinics where there's so much action, almost like a nonstop. They hardly had time to get a sip of water, and I think that's why people want to come back. So it was really cool.
Well, I think maybe for me, like they already said, keeping people moving, always staying busy. One thing I liked about the standard method, how Dennis did it, was not only did he did the teaching part, but he also did individual help and keeping people moving and giving them all individual instruction. And then the third, he always taught you how to take it home and practice. So I think those were a major part of what I learned when I was with him, and I took a lot of it into teaching when I went to Richmond.
For me, I think the first thing I noticed when I first observed the group classes and how they were conducted was the number of visuals that students were getting. And so I really took that to heart. And even though I was just beginning to really start teaching, the one thing that I took from Dennis was Dennis's ability to memorize names very, very quickly. And so I developed, following Dennis's lead, and I had large classes of kids starting off anywhere from 20 to 28 kids on the court, where I was the only instructor. So I learned to multi-ball feed, practice that with 5 and 6 lines quite a bit. But my ability to know their names and be able to use their name with 1 or 2 word feedback after they hit the ball and then continue feeding. In the area that I grew up in Maryland, where I was teaching, there were a lot of seasoned pros at clubs, but no one was doing what Dennis was doing. And therefore, no one was doing what I was doing. I was copying what I was learning from Dennis. And I had parents, after several months, who were coming out to my classes on public courts, who were in tennis centers at country clubs, because they had heard about what I was doing with kids. And for me, that was during my first 15, 16 years of teaching, I was teaching 200 kids a year. And that was just literally starting out in tennis. And it was a function of just the group classes and the communication and relationships that the kids and parents were building and all of that. So I really, thank Dennis for that.
The group lesson is one of the Dennis' philosophy is just to keep active everybody. Not only that, everybody mentioned about that. The other thing is it should be more game-based to make it more fun. And then you can see the progressions. You can, you're going to go to the next level. So that his methodology is very unique, and then make it more fun to work with that methodology, and then easy to explain to address the players' needs, whatever level they are, adults, beginners, intermediate, advanced, juniors, whatever level. So the way you organizing the lesson is amazingly, you can plan it and then you have to move on. You don't stay too long on one drill, so you have to move on. That really makes fun and then more enjoyable.
Excellent. Thank you. Habtu, you can keep the mic. I'm going to start with you now. I'm going to pick on something that Tina said earlier about a sense of humor, because that's something that I've recognized with just about everyone here that I've met, is that you all have a very wicked sense of humor, and certainly Dennis had one too. So I guess my question to the panel is, what side of emotional coaching did Dennis truly understand, and how do you think coaches nowadays will sometimes forget that?
Well, it's a very good question. So you have to make it more fun, and he have a great sense of humor. So he's gonna come in next to you and then show me something smart, something interesting, something, so always he's gonna make you just to think out of the box. So that really, really make the session, or even as a coach, so you can create out of the box. So which is really makes a big difference.
One of the things that I think, for that question, I don't think of myself as a comedian. Clearly, I don't have the talent of a Greg Prosciutto. I mean, no, I mean really. I mean that's a real talent in art. But what I found is that it's about relationships and the way that you relate to each individual person. And there's a quote that I'll share with you that I came across many years ago, and it embodied what I was learning from Dennis in terms of what that interaction with the student was all about. And it says, as I teach, I project the condition of my soul onto my students, my subject, and our way of being together. The entanglements I experience in the classroom are often no more or less than the convolutions of my inner life. Viewed from this angle, teaching holds a mirror to the soul. If I am willing to look in that mirror and not run from what I see, I have a chance to gain self-knowledge. And knowing myself is as crucial to good teaching as knowing my students and my subject. That for me was how I was able to feel people as I taught them. And that allowed me to impart the commentary that would go along with how I was teaching. And not something that I thought about, but that's where the humor came from me, was because I connected with the person who they were, as well as connecting with who I was. And that's the discovery period also, and process.
Thank you for sharing that quote. It's beautiful. What many of you don't know is that we have a group discount on the tattoo parlor down the street. We're all going to get that quote tattooed somewhere on our body. So thank you very much for sharing that. You just reminded me of that. Thank you.
All right, I'm first in line at the tattoo parlor. I think Dennis pretty much taught me on the teaching part is not only do they have to have enjoyment, but they got to really want to be coming back to you. And one of the things I usually always try to do, and I learned from him, was to have different obstacles, try to change it up as much as you possibly can. And always remember when my kids would come home from school, I'd say, "What did you learn?" And they'd say nothing. So I'd always try to make something interesting that if a kid got in the car with their parents and they said, "How'd your lesson go?" I'd always want them to go, "Wow, you wouldn't believe what we did today. We did this and this." So that's kind of one of my biggest takeaways, I think, from Dennis. Oh, and by the way, Greg did say I was Pat's favorite. That's true.
Oh gosh, for me, it was in light of a little bit of what Eddie mentioned, but being able to laugh at oneself and project that to if it's a group or a private lesson really makes a big difference. And there's a quote I kept hearing a lot sometimes. Dennis kept repeating. Gavin did the same as well, which I thought was very clever. It's more, we're on the court, we're teaching tennis, people are focusing, they're trying to get better, they're paying money to come in, they really want to get better. But it's not brain surgery, it's just tennis. And that quote kept coming back, like, take it more with a grain of salt, but people remember or learn better in a fun, jovial environment, if you will. And making jokes, people would remember. I don't know if Eddie remembers, but I watched him very often because Eddie, of course, was the star player. He would play like exhibitions, and sometimes Eddie would make jokes. He was so fast he was able to get to balls, but the ball would be, like, say, the other guy would hit a good shot, and Eddie would say, "No, it's out." And people are like, oh, you hear the sound in the crowd, people watching you guys playing. And then, no, it was out of reach. So that was an example there, and everybody could remember, oh, that was a great point. You could keep hearing for weeks, from us especially, going like, oh my gosh, did you see what it... So that's just an example. I think people remember better. It relaxes the atmosphere. And like Gavin kept saying with Dennis as well, it's just tennis. It's not brain surgery. So I try to use that as well myself.
Yeah, I don't really know if I can add on to like what everybody said here. I mean, I was just going to repeat. But yeah, I mean, it's that connection that you have with your students, and as they come back, it's how much can you joke with them versus, you know, how much do you have to be more caring, and we've gone into a world where you can't touch anybody anymore. For me, back when, you know, I was starting out, it was making those connections and realizing that it's not just the relationship that I had with them on the court, but because I was at a country club, so they were there 24/7. It was the relationship that I also was able to build with them off the court, also, and to get to know them, so that, you know, I would be someone that they would want to continue to come back to from time and time again, because, you know, I'm a little corny and I have some off-color jokes, which can't use anymore either.
All right, well, thank you. You guys all gave some great stories. You gave me an idea about one of his quotes. I was going to have everyone go down and say one of their favorite quotes from Dennis, besides your brain surgery one.
So I was in one of the first the USTA high performance things down in Florida, and, you know, was invited back for one here. And Dennis was always trying to make tennis easier to learn. And he came in and he goes, you know, people are just complaining about this Western grip. And he's holding the racket. And he goes, because people are just like, you know, well, takes you so long to turn it around to get to, you know, your backhand grip. And he goes, and he literally gave the people at the USTA the finger while we're all just there laughing because he's making a joke of it. This is your forehand, and this is your back. And he was just there like that, and he was making a joke of it, and I just kind of sat there like, but also laughing on the inside because I realized he really is a genius, because we're all sitting there going, yeah, it's so hard to do this. And Dennis just broke everything down to be so simple, and he did it like laughing, just going, I figured it out. How did you all not figure it out? You guys are the scientists. Well, maybe let those of us who play the game teach the game.
That's a good point. I remember quotes that he would say with Heike, the dog, but not sure I can say that in front of people. Certain quotes were interesting, but a funny story with that is, of course, was playing doubles with Pat and, of course, Dennis or Louis, or if it's Eddie or Rick, and the dog was always sitting on the side, and Dennis would say certain quotes, but that was just playing tennis there. Nothing really was pretty bad. But I just want to go back to his, with Dennis' sense of humor. I think it really, really made a big difference in his success, his ability to adapt, because sometimes we would prep the courts. I remember vividly days of we had to prepare the courts for the clinic, like squeegeeing the court because it had rained or something, and if there was another downpour, he was able to capture people's attention in the upstairs room. And to keep people engaged, you really need to have a very good personality, and be able to be jovial was probably one of his biggest traits on that. So it was pretty cool. But again, certain quotes I just don't want to repeat.
Dennis was very sarcastic at the same time. I mean, he was funny, but he was also very sarcastic. And I think one I used to hear every week, there'd be like 6 courts, and he'd say, all right, we need everybody over here to the first court. And people would slowly start coming, and he would yell out, no saya apura. And it meant, no hurry, don't hurry. Just, people were just kind of like, huh, what? So he was very sarcastic and trying to get people to, get to the courts and stuff like that. So, Dennis was very sarcastic at the same time, funny at the same.
Well, as some of you may know, one of the places that you would see me typically at symposiums was on the side of the court filming everything that was on court. And everything that I filmed, I would share with Dennis. And this is back in the days when I'd be giving Dennis like 8 or 10 VHS tapes of all the presentations. So After a while, it just occurred to me that, and these were with all the presenters that were invited here to Hilton Head, and it occurred to me at one point, and I asked Dennis, I said, you know, you've got all of these tapes that I'm giving to you. I know you know all the things that they're doing for the most part. You know, why is it that you still want to see all of this, this footage? And he said to me, every day I learn something new from teaching. And I think for me that was like set in stone, because I figured if Dennis Vandermeer can learn something every day from even watching someone who's not even on his level in a presentation, then who the hell am I to think that I know, you know, everything about this game? And again, that's kind of the image that I often perceived of the pros that were where I live, at the country clubs and other places. They knew one way, and that was the way they taught. And so my mind has always been open. I've always been very creative as a result of that. So I really thank Dennis again.
I want to just make a comment and just follow up his remark. And Dennis, he watched not only the Grand Slam events or major tournaments, he goes to Orange Bowl and watch junior players. And then he just said one time, we learn from these junior players. So not everybody the same. The European or South American, they come up with Western open stance, the way they hit the ball, the way handling the shot, the way they move. He watched every players. And he learned, as the same thing, I agree with him. He learned from everybody. And then he said, we changed our teaching methodology because of these players who play, making a new way of to hit the tennis balls. I really, really have a great respect for that. So he's a very extraordinary human being. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, you can keep the mic because we're going to start with you now. We know Dennis was an incredible coach, but he also was a pretty decent businessman. So I guess my question is, based on his principles, based on his teachings, what can modern clubs learn from Dennis about scaling without sacrificing quality?
That's a very good question, because he really, really had that down. I mean, it was incredible because everybody that came on Hilton Head, for example, if it's an adult clinic, a junior camp, a TU, there was always something else. Well, why is there something else? Because he forced out that and said, like, oh, Tina, good job. You did level 101. Great. Good luck. Go play. No, there's level 202. 201. You add. You can get better. And here are the programs that we offer. By the way, if you do this, look what. So the derivative of his programs were just incredible, I thought. And he kept thinking of ways all the time. I remember a few times, even Gavin got on me on that, but I had to clean Dennis's office a few times because he had a lot of materials there so he could find his chair. But essentially, the books he was reading or articles was all about that. A lot of people say, well, it's marketing. It's not just marketing. It's how the human brain works. Why would you want to come back? Well, because the experience was incredible. Oh, because I saw Fast Eddie running down a ball and hitting the tweener. I'm coming back. How does he do that? I want to. So there's always something. He kept thinking of that constantly. And to have that side, that creative side, it's pretty incredible. Of course, he was surrounded with great people like Butch Staple, Gavin, people like that. Louis, they were able to feed him ideas, but to make that a reality is incredible, you know. And to me, I always was floored that people would, hey, I've been here, that's my 7th year coming back. Wow, that doesn't happen in a lot of industries. So to me, that side of him really pushing the right button, asking, what can I do to bring that back? How was the experience? What happened? Is it so? It's not just a survey, but everybody, you know, you'd always see the people coming back basically with a big smile and happy to be back. So I thought that was great.
not only was he just a good marketer, but he was a tennis enthusiast that would try to get new people involved. And I don't know how many of you still remember the guinea pigs. He would do a tennis university, and then all the coaches had to teach free lessons to the people in the community. So, they're getting interested in the game of tennis, and soon they were probably coming to some of his classes and some of Louis' clinics and things like that. So not only was he good at what he did, but he also got new players involved in the game and got them excited about it. And I wonder how many guinea pigs are now coaches. I mean, you just don't know. So, yeah.
Yeah, for me, I mean, one of the things that, with that question, the first thing that I saw, obviously, coming down here was the business that Dennis had built here. And it was just extraordinary. I mean, from Steve to Gavin, those were obviously the first two people I met, to Radhika, to Sujay. They were just, and Helma, to Louis. I began to understand the quality, not just of the people, but of your selections in building your business, whatever it is. And I was able to take that tennis example and apply it towards the legal world that I spend a large amount of my time in. And it was really because of how Dennis built his house and watching what steps he took and how he kind of cultivated that. I began to use that. I work a lot in litigation, and sometimes I've been over litigations with 200, 300, 500, 1,000 attorneys where I've overseen litigation and had to have select people leading different parts of that. And I owe all that to Dennis, just in terms of being able to cull the people that I needed to help grow whatever it was that I was doing in those particular spheres. So, just as a businessman and a marketer, he will always be, one of the most esteemed people that I can think of.
From the business perspective, he promote the tennis academy concept, modernize it, how players long-term development program with the professional when in the business side, from on the court. And off the court, for instance, he loved teaching aids. For instance, there is some footworks, I remember there is some steps you're gonna do in 30 seconds or 1 minute. So you can do that one, how many you're gonna do. And then he showed it to you with the best players. I remember Amanda Kusa, she was one of the top players. Among all those world-class players, about 40 or over 40 players, this how is she doing it. And then encourage people to bite, the coaches to bite, the players to bite. They can improve their footwork. That kind of mentality, just different way of marketing. And a pair of shoes, you get new pair of shoes. When it comes, you're gonna show it to you. This is the best shoes. And then you work on the court, and then you see this sound? If you don't move your feet, you will never get this sound. That kind of sense of humor, and then this is another way, marketing strategy he used. So I really admire him always.
One thing I want to add to that, going back to the business side, one of the things that Dennis did, and I don't know how many people will remember this, but when someone would come out with a new ball basket, and it would be very easy to use. There were a couple, I think at one point I bought 3. I can't remember the name of this particular basket. But Dennis would see this basket, see its utility versus the square kind of basket on rollers. This one folded. It also had a basket. And he bought out the company, bought the guy's company, and he sold those baskets to us sit next to nothing. Okay? There you go. There, absolutely. And I literally still have one brand new one in a box that I haven't used yet. But, you know, having the best equipment helps you build your business base, you know, if you're in this particular business. And so, besides just being a businessman, he wanted us to be successful entrepreneurs in this sport and did as much as he could do to provide us with those things that we needed, those tools, at a bargain price.
Tina, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think, you know, one thing about Dennis was he knew he didn't know it all, so he always surrounded himself with people who he thought knew more than him. Skip Hartman, Mayor David Dinkins, Luciano Batti. They were men that, you know, helped him advance what he has here and built this into what it is. So I just learned that, you know, I need to always be looking for my mentors. Fortunately, I married a pretty good one. So, but, you know, I always look to Dennis for that, just to, you know, he didn't know it all, and he always surrounded himself with people who knew more. So, you know, when Ken Dehart would be doing a speech, I would make sure I was always there watching. Somebody that I always, you know, Pete Collins, you know, those mentors, those original 8. I mean, you know, I would always make sure, like, if they were speaking, I would go and watch.
Great, thank you. All right, we're about to have to wrap up, so let's make the last question pretty quick. What is one thing that one of Dennis's teachings that is still super relevant today?
Instant tennis.
That's a great one, you know, actually. For me, I would say the pronation, supination, pronation, explanation. Pretty cool, because that's still mystifies, even today, I think, a lot of coaches on that form. Again, serve, pronation, supination, pronation, that's what I would say.
I think maybe one thing that I remember a lot about his teaching was the backhand half volley, where he did the rising socket opposed to the rotating socket. And to me, that sticks in my mind, because obviously I didn't know all that. But that's what I would say.
For me, it would be progressions, because I see so many coaches and their students watching professional tennis and then trying to teach their students Alcaraz's forehand or, you know, whatever. And you can't teach those strokes unless you have progressions. And they have no progressions. They're going out there and just trying to mimic the stroke and then to apply it to a 13, 14, 15-year-old, which is crazy. I mean...
That just reminded me of a quote from Dennis. Why does a dog lick its? Because it can. Why can Alcaraz hit that forehand? Because he can.
Thank you for the censorship.
I cannot say better than that. Good job.
I think Lyle is offended, but
Well, I think he barked and got taken to the room.
so, poor Lyle. So I think that kind of wraps it up. But just to kind of sum it all up, I think obviously I don't know if I could ask for a better panel until maybe tomorrow when I'm moderating the 18 other panels. But I will say that looking at your body of work, all of you should not only be so proud, but I know Dennis would be proud. Thank you all for your contributions to not only PTR, but also to the industry. I always like to think when I go to these events and I go to cocktail parties, and people always ask me, you know, what do I do for a living? And that's a question we all get. And it's very difficult to explain what we do for a living, because it's more than just teaching, right? So I often try to rephrase that question into, instead of what do we do for a living, it's what do we do while we're living, right? So thank you to all of you for all of your contributions to, again, the organization, to the industry, Thank you so much for your time and sharing your wisdom and knowledge. Appreciate it. Thank you all.